we have another huge album that has come out here in 2013, an album from a band that we haven't heard from in a little while, and that's the band Suffocation. Yeah, Suffocation. These guys are considered legendary in the death metal market. They're considered to be one of the real innovators of this genre ever since they came out of the gate back in the early 1990s. They've really been responsible for some of the classics of the genre, and even though they've kind of gone through their own lineup turmoil and a brief period of disbandment, this group is a group of guys that still maintains widespread popularity in the heavy metal market. A prime example of this is the fact that their last album, which was released 4 years ago in 2009, entitled Blood Oath, was actually at number 135 after its first week on the Billboard Top 200, which actually is showcasing that these guys have a very dedicated following that have continued to buy their albums throughout their existence, to the point where now they're starting to get recognition on one of the most important charts in America. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. And it's also crazy that it's 3,600 copies. It doesn't seem like a lot to, get onto the chart. In fact, it seems like that's just a way low number. But considering this is death metal going up against, bubblegum bullshit that always charts, it's pretty damn impressive. Let's see what happens here in 2013 with Pinnacle of Bedlam. This is an album that was just released on the 15th in some corners of the globe, however, will not receive its full release here in America, at least in some markets, including my store, until tomorrow on the 22nd. And with Pinnacle of Bedlam, Suffocation is not a band that's necessarily going to abandon their roots all that much. They're not necessarily going to go from death metal to, jazz-laden artcore or something like that. They're not exactly going to do a full 180 Morbid Angel style turn on us like the band did in 2011. So that's one thing that's definitely a benefit. The second thing that is really a benefit to this is that it's very recognizable. Suffocation has one of those sounds that really had that very early tone of death metal where, there wasn't exactly a shit ton of polish on the production work. However, for the time, it definitely sounded crisp. It definitely sounded fresh. Not to mention, these guys are wildly talented, so there's a lot of technical ability that is showcased on each and every track. That all has definitely retained itself here in 2013, just like it had in the early 1990s. The only difference is that there's a little bit of a crank up on the production value, as that's just kind of been the norm as of late. So instead of it sounding a little bit murky or a little bit low on the tonal scale, it's definitely been scaled up. However, the same tonal feeling, the same, real feel that you get from listening to Suffocation is not really all of that different. They're not going to break the formula. In fact, you get launched directly into this album with track number 1. It's something where there's not even really an introduction to it. It's something where you're thrust right into what feels like, the middle of a verse or something like that, but this is just the way that they wanted the album to get kicked off. They wanted it to be something where it kicks off and kicks you square in the teeth. You're getting right into it. It's almost like saying, hey, I know it's been 4 years, but fuck you. How you doing? Welcome us back, else we're going to steamroll right over you. And that's kind of what you get over the 10 tracks here. This is something where, with Suffocation, the riffs are always big, the solos are always bigger, and the way in which the song construction works is something that basically is just kind of in the sensible region of death metal. This is something where they're not necessarily trying to tinker and tailor new sounds. They're not necessarily trying to be a pioneer for the next generation of death metal. They're basically doing what they do best and continuing on with that proud tradition. And that's something that's made Suffocation definitely one of those legendary bands. They're a band that has that never say die mentality, that also has that mentality where they're just going to do what it is they do best. And Pinnacle of Bedlam definitely showcases this. The one thing that I will say about this album that is a little bit weaker than perhaps some others is that as it kind of goes on and on, the riffs are big and the solos are definitely huge, but there seems to be a little bit of a dissatisfaction, or should I say an imbalance. Imbalance is the word, really, between the big riffs and the big solos. I really think that even though solos are not mandatory or necessary in each and every song in order to make it key, I really think that there are a couple of locations where it was kind of hurting for it. There's a couple of locations where you could definitely get a really, really nice reaction and definitely boost up the value of a song with a huge solo. And there's examples laced within this because there are solos on this record, and whenever they do come down the pike on, the couple of different songs where they happen, where you definitely hear the presence of a very powerful lead, those songs really kind of stick out. They are something that remain with you, and it's something that definitely fuels you to continue to listen onward. Else, it might be something where it would kind of get old after a little while. It may be something that just sort of fades in your brain a little bit, and the album would kind of strike as mediocre. With the presence of the, ever so often guitar solo and the powerful riffs, it actually accentuates and boosts the value of the album. It definitely gives it a nice little mingling process. It gives you a little bit more to focus on aside from just the guttural vocals, the heavy, drum and bass that is present that really kind of fuels the rhythm and the lead. It's just something where, those little bonuses, those little things that you really notice are always, something that kind of helps. Take a look at a track such as Sullen Days, where it definitely has a little bit of a different ting to it. It kind of has a very basic structure, but at the same time, that structure is filled with a very addicting style guitar lick that kind of takes you into the verses and into the song itself. And then, in that circular motion that oftentimes defines really good work, it's done once again near the ending point of the track. It's something that sticks with you. It's something where that track and that riff stays with you and stays in your mind. And it's something that helps you remember. Now, the very last track on this album is kind of a curious type, the Beginning of Sorrow. This is actually a reworking of an old track that Suffocation had previously done, kind of modernizing it for 2013. And let me tell you something, it sounds really good. It's a good endpoint. It's something where whenever it first starts off, you really don't think much of it. In fact, whenever it starts off, you think maybe it isn't exactly the best choice to be the final song on a record. But then, as it continues onward, it sort of exposes itself to you a little bit more and kind of opens up. And whenever that composition opens up, you start to get into it a lot, and basically you notice that the introduction and the points that maybe you didn't find to be, the best parts of the song were actually just driving points that were taking you to the body of the song and taking you deeper into what the song is kind of trying to represent to you. And that's the reason why it actually works fairly well. Overall, this album definitely is a good return after 4 years of dormancy. Comparing it to Blood Oath is very difficult considering it's been a long time since I've listened to Blood Oath. It's actually been quite a while since I've listened to Suffocation in general, so this is kind of a nice little reawakening for the band in my personal lore. It's something that is encouraging me to go all the way back to the beginning and kind of explore these guys once again. It's kind of one of the nice things about these albums from these classic artists. It encourages you to kind of revisit their discography whenever their new one comes out. It encourages you to kind of take that trip back to the past and remind yourself why these guys are considered to be legends. I would definitely give it a solid 8. I really enjoyed this record. I think that it's sometimes a little bit, samey, but I mean, death metal definitely has that striking ear. It's definitely an album that doesn't get old, though. It's not something that traditionally would bore you. There are some death metal albums that kind of just rehash and rehash the same ideas over and over again. And whenever that happens, it becomes boring in a hurry. Suffocation doesn't really do that. They at least keep it fresh. So, there you go. The new Suffocation, Pinnacle of Bedlam, strong 8. I'll talk to you guys later. Rock.